The story of the first world champion and the man who shaped the game forever. Chapter 1. A boy from Derbyshire, born on April 15, 1901, in Whitwell, a small mining village in Derbyshire, England. Joe Davis came into a world of coal dust and economic hardship. The early 1900s were an age of transformation, but in working-class communities like Whitwell, life moved slowly. Fathers worked in coal mines, mothers tended the home. Children were expected to follow in their parents' footsteps. Joe was different. He wasn't drawn to the mines. From an early age, his eyes were set on something else. Something unusual for a boy from a working-class family, a billiard table. When his family moved to Chesterfield, Joe's father opened a billiard hall. It was small, smoky, and dimly lit, but to young Joe, it was a palace. By age 10, he had picked up his first cue. By age 12, he was spending hours after school, perfecting his shots, watching older players, mimicking their styles, and learning angles by heart. He had no coach, no lessons, just natural ability, endless curiosity, and an obsession with precision. Chapter 2. Learning the Art of Billiards. Joe began with English billiards, a game more popular than snooker at the time. It involved 3 balls, red, white, and yellow, and demanded strategic skill. Even as a teenager, Joe was outperforming older players. He learned not only the rules of the game, but the unspoken language of strategy. He would often beat adult players who underestimated him. He watched players not just to learn how they won, but why they lost. At 15, he started playing for money. At 18, he was entering tournaments. But Joe had his eyes on more than local fame. He wanted to master the science of cue sports, and soon, he found something new, something more challenging, something called snooker. Chapter 3. The Rise of Snooker. Invented in the late 19th century by British Army officers in India, snooker had slowly started gaining popularity in England. It had 21 colored balls and demanded both tactical planning and flair. Most players considered it a novelty. Joe Davis saw something different. He saw a sport that had depth. One mistake could change the frame. One brilliant break could destroy an opponent. Where billiards was elegant and measured, snooker was brutal, punishing, and artistic. Joe started experimenting with snooker in the early 1920s. While most players still stuck with billiards, Joe committed to both games. He would practice billiards by day and snooker by night. He didn't just play the game, he studied it. He began keeping records of his practice sessions, developing systems for positional play, and crafting strategies years ahead of his time. Chapter 4. The Turning Point. Professional Status. By 1924, Joe Davis had turned professional. He was playing billiards matches across the country and slowly building a reputation as a serious competitor. But he wasn't satisfied. In 1926, he approached a billiards hall owner and promoter named Bill Camkin with an idea to host a professional snooker tournament. There had never been a formal world championship in snooker before. It wasn't even considered a proper professional sport. But Joe knew that if he wanted to be the best, he had to make the game matter. Camkin agreed. They gathered players from across England, including top names like Tom Dennis and Albert Cope. The prize money was low, just a few pounds. But that wasn't the point. The point was recognition. And so, in May 1927, history was made. Chapter 5. The First World Snooker Championship. The first World Snooker Championship took place at Camkin's Hall in Birmingham. There were just 10 participants. Joe Davis was both a competitor and one of the event organizers. The format was simple, straight knockout, with the final being a best-of-33 frame match. Joe faced Tom Dennis in the final. Dennis was no pushover. He was a crafty, experienced player with decades of cue experience. But Joe had something no one else did, a calculated, strategic style never seen before. He read the table like a mathematician. He positioned the cue ball like a surgeon. After several intense days of play, Joe Davis defeated Tom Dennis 20-11 and became the first ever world snooker champion. At just 26 years old, Joe had made history, but for him, it was just the beginning. Chapter 6. The Golden Era of Domination, 1928 to 1940. Joe Davis defended his title the following year. From 1928 to 1940, Joe won 14 straight world titles. No one could touch him. He elevated the sport from pub games to theaters and smoke-filled arenas, drawing large crowds who came to witness a master at work. His break building was unmatched. His positional play was revolutionary. His temperament was calm under pressure. He often beat his opponents before they even started, because they feared his precision. In 1935, snooker overtook billiards in popularity, a shift largely credited to Joe Davis. The media dubbed him the Napoleon of the Green Bays, but Joe wasn't in it for fame. He wanted to make snooker a world-class sport, and he did. Chapter 7. The War Years, 1941 to 1945. When World War II broke out, many sports paused, but Joe Davis continued to support the game by playing exhibition matches for British troops and war workers. He traveled to military bases, factories, and airfields with his cue in hand, using snooker to raise morale. His patriotism was quiet but powerful. Even during these difficult years, he kept practicing, writing, and planning for snooker's post-war future. In 1946, the championship returned, and Joe Davis won his 15th world title, defeating Horace Lindrum 78-67 in a marathon match. It would be his last. He could have continued, but Joe believed in the importance of timing. He passed the torch to his younger brother Fred Davis, who would go on to become an 8-time world champion himself. Joe instead focused on promoting the sport. He published books like How I Play Snooker and appeared on television, bringing snooker into people's living rooms for the first time. He was no longer just a player, he was a statesman of snooker. Chapter 9, the first 147 and modern legacy. In 1955, at age 54, Joe Davis made history again. He compiled the first officially recognized 147 maximum break during an exhibition match in London. Even decades after his first title, Joe was proving that greatness doesn't age. He mentored younger stars, advised governing bodies, and remained active in the sport until his final years. When snooker became a televised phenomenon in the 1960s and 70s, the new stars always pointed to one man, Joe Davis. He was the reason the game existed in its modern form. Chapter 10. Death of a Legend, Immortality on the Bays. Joe Davis passed away on July 10, 1978, at the age of 77. He left behind a record that may never be equaled. Chapter 11. The Brotherhood, Joe and Fred Davis. Joe wasn't the only cue sports genius in the family. His younger brother, Fred Davis, born in 1913, grew up watching Joe dominate the bays. But Fred wasn't just watching, he was learning. And under Joe's guidance, Fred eventually became a top-tier professional in his own right. What made their relationship fascinating was its duality. They were family, but also future rivals. Joe taught Fred the foundations of the game: footwork, cue control, shot selection. He helped him refine his break building and positional play. But there was always an unspoken awareness. One day, Fred might be the one to challenge Joe himself. Fred never beat Joe in a world championship final, but after Joe's retirement, Fred Davis won 8 world championships, helping carry the family legacy well into the 1950s and 60s. Together, the Davis brothers built the DNA of modern snooker. One began the story, the other continued it. Chapter 12. Inside the Mind of a Genius. Joe Davis wasn't just a physical player, he was an intellectual. He saw the game like a mathematician sees equations. He would play a red ball and already know where he wanted the cue ball 5 shots later. His notebooks were filled with calculations, diagrams, and patterns. He broke the game into systems, not just reactions. He was possibly the first player to bring a scientific approach to snooker. In one of his own books, Joe wrote, "There are no lucky champions. What some call luck is the result of 1,000 hours of preparation and 1,000 failures before success." He believed that every frame had a solution, and that solution could be discovered through relentless practice and perfect discipline. While other players relied on flair, Joe relied on preparation. Chapter 13. The players he faced, though Joe Davis dominated the game, he did have rivals, men who, in other eras, might have been champions themselves. Tom Dennis, the man Joe beat in the first World Championship final. A seasoned, confident player with strong fundamentals, Davis defeated him 4 times in championship finals. Dennis would forever be remembered as the man who came closest to stopping the legend, but never did. Horace Lindrum, an Australian genius and Davis's toughest post-war rival. Their 1946 final remains legendary, a grueling 145-frame battle, the longest world championship match in history at the time. Joe's win against Lindrum was arguably his hardest fought. Sidney Smith, Willie Smith, and others. These men formed the backbone of snooker's early resistance against Davis. Talented, sharp, but always just one level below the master. Joe never belittled his rivals. In fact, he credited them often. In interviews, he once said, "A great player is made not just by his wins, but by the greatness of those he defeats." Chapter 14. The Championship Years, Frame by Frame, 1927 to 1946. Let's explore a year-by-year breakdown of Joe Davis's championship reign. 1927, the inaugural title. Venue, Campkins Hall, Birmingham. Opponent, Tom Dennis. Result, 20-11. The first official snooker world title. Joe helped organize it and won it. 1928 to 1930. Joe defended his title easily, establishing snooker as more than a novelty. His precision and clean positional play became his signature. 1931-1934. Snooker became more popular, with bigger crowds and larger prize money. Joe's dominance pushed others to improve. 1935 to 1939. During these years, snooker overtook billiards as England's most watched cue sport. Joe remained untouchable, even as players like Horace Lindrum began challenging his crown. 1940-1945. Championships paused due to World War II. Joe played exhibition matches across the country for the armed forces. 1946 Final Triumph. Venue, Royal Horticultural Hall, London. Opponent, Horace Lindrum. Result, 78 to 67. A grueling match. Joe was 45 years old. The final title. The perfect farewell. Chapter 15. Joe Davis and World War II, a quiet hero. While many players faded during the war, Joe stepped up. He toured Britain, playing charity exhibitions in air raid shelters, hospitals, and barracks. Sometimes he'd play with equipment made of makeshift materials. Other times, he played in complete darkness during air raids, waiting out the sirens before continuing. He donated winnings to soldier relief funds and promoted the idea that snooker could provide hope and distraction in times of uncertainty. He wasn't flashy. He didn't give long speeches. But the BBC saw Joe as the perfect bridge between eras. In the early 1950s, Joe began appearing on television, performing trick shots, analysis, and commentary. His calm voice and poised demeanor made him a hit with viewers. In one iconic episode, he demonstrated a flawless 100 break while explaining every shot, step by step, to a live audience. This turned him into more than just a player. He was now a teacher, a mentor, and a symbol of what the sport could be. His book, How I Play Snooker, sold thousands of copies and became the reference point for aspiring champions. Chapter 17, the 147 break, a perfect moment. In 1955, Joe Davis made history once more. During a public exhibition in London, Joe compiled a 147 break, the maximum possible score in snooker. It wasn't during a world final, it wasn't televised, but for the hundreds who watched it live, it was like seeing a painter finish their masterpiece. No one else had ever done it in a recognized setting. To this day, Joe's 147 stands as a reminder that excellence isn't bound by age. He was 54 years old when he achieved it, proving that greatness can evolve, not just fade. Chapter 18, Personal Life, the man behind the cue. Behind the scenes, Joe Davis was a private man. He never sought the spotlight outside snooker. He was married to his beloved wife, Edith, and they lived quietly in Luton. He had no children, but many of the players he mentored considered him a father figure. He enjoyed reading, music, and gardening. A humble life. No luxury, no scandal, no wild behavior. Just the rhythm of routine and quiet dignity. Many players described him as intensely focused, but deeply kind. In interviews, he rarely talked about himself. He only talked about the game. Chapter 19, Death and Eternal Legacy. Joe Davis died in 1978, just months after the World Championship moved permanently to the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, now considered the sport's holy ground. He never got to see the rise of Steve Davis, Stephen Hendry, or Ronnie O'Sullivan, but all of them credit Joe as the foundation. To this day, no player has matched his 15 world titles, and certainly not with 15 straight victories. Every break built with elegance, every strategic safety shot, every moment of silence before a cue strike, all echo Joe Davis's influence. Chapter 20, Why Joe Davis Still Matters. Snooker is now a global sport, broadcast in over 100 countries, played by millions, with professional circuits in the UK, China, Pakistan, Australia, and beyond. But in every snooker club, in every young boy or girl holding a cue for the first time, in every championship final at the Crucible, one man's name still casts a shadow: Joe Davis. Because he didn't just play the game, he didn't just win. He built the world in which others could rise.